So first of all, there's the difference between sprouts and microgreens and baby greens even. We'll talk about all three of those. The type of microgreen we're going to be growing is organic speckled pea. Hello YouTube gardeners, today I'm going to talk about microgreens and I want to do a little experiment with it like usual. I'm going to test the difference between putting a tray out in my greenhouse, putting a tray in a sunny window, and putting a tray under some LED lamps to see what the difference is. The type of microgreen we're going to be growing is organic speckled pea, and these ones are packaged specifically for microgreen growing. And they're my favorite, actually. I love them. They taste a lot like sugar snap peas. But the housekeeping items I want to discuss. So first of all, there's the difference between sprouts and microgreens and baby greens even. We'll talk about all three of those. But let's start with sprouts. Sprouts are not grown usually in any type of soil or anything like that. Sometimes they'll be grown on a little sponge. But sprouting trays, you can look at them, they look like the little kids' sand sifting toys. That's what they remind me of. And it's a matter of just keeping the seeds wet long enough or moist long enough that they can sprout, and then you eat them pretty quickly like that. You'll often see them in the refrigerated part of the produce section at the grocery store, where you'll have alfalfa sprouts or bean sprouts, things like that. They're pretty tasty, and they only have a small noticeable any type of leaf development on them, and that's what a sprout is. Microgreens are different in that they have the first set of leaves coming on, not the adult leaves, not true leaves if you will, but they're called cotyledons. The microgreens usually are grown in some type of medium soil or potting soil. That's what I use, is some organic potting soil without nutrients in it, and they do have their first set of leaves. Then there's baby greens. You've all probably been able to have a baby green salad or seen the baby green mixes in the produce section at the grocery store, but baby greens are a few weeks past the point of microgreens. So once you get microgreens, let them go for another week or two where they are starting to change to more mature leaves on the plants, and that's when they are considered baby greens. Anything after that is just the plant until it's grown up to a full-size plant. But there are a few steps to doing microgreens, and I'm gonna go out to the garage now and fill up some of the trays and show you what I like to do. Right, so I have 3 different trays I plan on doing. Again, one in the greenhouse, one just in the sunny window, and one with LED lights on it. So I'm just gonna grab some handfuls of this. You wanna have it more than just covering. I'd say minimum of 1/2 inch, but in these low profile trays, you can't really have 1 inch or anything like that. It'll just be too close to spilling over the top. So this is what I'm using to just measure and get roughly what I need. And then I'm gonna pour them into a bucket and get it wetted down. So there's my first tray. Okay, got enough for 3 trays. I put it all in this bucket. Now I'm gonna go get the soil moist. So I am a big proponent of using rainwater. I have rain barrels that I catch water in and try to use that as much as I can. It's good for the plants. Obviously it helps save water, but when it comes to microgreens, I've had problems with rainwater just getting kind of funky when I'm leaving them in the microgreen environment. You know, it has to be dark and humid for a couple days. We'll go over that here in just a little bit, but just wanted to mention that in this case, I prefer using treated water. I'm gonna just get it a little bit in there and mix it. What I'm trying to do is just get it damp, but on the little bit more wet side of damp. Not enough that it's soggy, but the seeds are going to need the moisture. We're going to be misting the seeds every day, but that soil is pretty close to what I want. Yep, I'm good with that. So here's the 3 trays I'm going to use for our little microgreen experiment. I'm going to go ahead and put the moisten soil in the trays, evenly distributed. All right, now that the soil's in there, again, I just use a potting soil, organic mix with no added nutrients. Don't really need nutrients. The seeds contain all the nutrition that the plant needs in order to germinate and sprout. And then it relies on photosynthesis to get any bigger from there. Something interesting about microgreen nutrition value, depending on which microgreen you're growing and eating, can be anywhere from 4 to 50 times more nutrient dense than their adult counterparts. All right, so when you get microgreens, one thing that some people do is they'll use like a spatula to get things leveled and pressed in, kind of smooth. You want to, where you're doing microgreens, you're going to have seeds all over. It's kind of important to have it be smooth and level. Got to get a new tripod that doesn't fall over from the weight of my camera. Sorry about that. But it's important to have them smooth and level, so when they're germinating and you're ready to harvest them, they're all at the basic same height. If you have really high spots or really low spots, it's going to be harder to harvest. This is one way of kind of smoothing things out. Another way that I like to do it is to just grab another tray and push down on it like that. Granted, these little grooves are going to leave a little bit of a line, but I've not really had much of a problem. But as I'm sitting here doing it, it does look like the spatula does a better job. I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. We're not going for concrete level smoothness here. We're just trying to get it mostly level. Well, it has finally happened. I'm doing some editing, trying to put this video all together, and I realized I must not have hit the record button on a pretty good section that is kind of important. So I don't want to just skip it. I'll talk about it while I give you a view and see if anything interesting is happening in my backyard area. After spreading the soil into the trays and getting them packed down and smooth, it's time to put the seeds onto the soil and move forward with getting them to germinate. With a larger seed like these, it's pretty important for microgreens especially to go ahead and pre-soak them. I have had them soaking overnight, but you should soak them for at least 6 to 8 hours, I would say. The reason you want to soak them is because they're a big enough seed. If you put them in that moistened soil in the tray, the pea seed itself soaks up all the moisture, and sometimes it doesn't have quite enough to go ahead and make the germination process happen and thrive. And I think I've only done it once where I forgot to pre-soak them and I went forward with it anyway, and just wasn't as good of germination rates, and some of them were pretty late. It was more sporadic. I had some that were 1.5 inches tall and some that were 2 inches tall, instead of a nice even top where it's easier to cut and harvest. I think that's about all I missed. I'll jump back into the regular video at this point. So now that I've got them evenly distributed, I'm going to take a tray. I'm going to lightly press down on these and turn it in case some of them aren't making contact. The idea of this, why I'm doing this, is to make sure the seeds all have good contact with the soil. Definitely not pushing hard enough to crush anything or squish them. And then I like to get a brick or a rock somewhere from the garden or something that weighs a few pounds and rest them on here, just to help make sure they keep in contact with the soil until they germinate. So at this point, they're going to stay under cover in darkness for about 3-4 days. I'm going to be checking on them every day and misting them with a little sprayer every day, just to make sure they have enough moisture to germinate. We're going to again do one out in the greenhouse, one by the sunny window, and one under LED lights down in my grow tent. We're going to see what the results are. I haven't done this before, so I'm interested to see. So I found a good spot to keep them. We were given this mudroom bench from a neighbor a couple weeks ago. The microgreens prefer to be around 70 degrees for optimum germination and growth, so it's good to keep them inside your house somewhere. They don't take up much space, so I've put them under my bed before. I put them in a room that's not used as often, but they do like a dark space, which we put the lids on them for keeping them dark, and the other lids, I say lids, but the other trays are also there to help keep them pressed into the soil. And so, like I mentioned, I like to get a rock or sometimes a brick. It just helps push those down into the soil a little bit. One time I forgot to check on them in time. Some stuff came up, and so it went about 5 or 6 days before I checked on them, and it was peas. And I came in and it had completely lifted up the brick and the top tray that I had on there, and they were starting to push out the sides in between the lid or the top tray. So to quote a friend of mine, the will to live is strong when it comes to plants. So this is where I'm going to keep them. I'll mist them for the next 3 days. Probably won't show you that, but then I will show you as they start to germinate and grow and make some progress. No, I told you I wasn't going to show you when I mist them every day, but I also told you I'd let you know when things start growing, and things are definitely starting to grow. I figured I would show you. I like to use one of these continuous spray bottles. You don't have to pump it as much to get the spray out as you do kind of an old traditional spray bottle. That's it for misting them. I'm glad we are definitely having some growth. I'm going to check on them again tomorrow for sure. This is what they look like at day 3. We're about 72 hours into this, and when I get closer, you can see that they're starting to get their leaves on there. I'm going to keep them in the dark for one more day. Tomorrow I'll pull them out and put them in their respective places to see. All right, today's the day for harvesting the microgreens. The different ones I had, just as a reminder, I had LED light, sunny window, and the greenhouse. I think the differences between the plants are very apparent and not exactly what I expected. So the LED lights are the thickest and have the most green, dark green, luscious color. The sunny window ones are clearly the tallest. They're getting kind of leggy. That happens when the plants are kind of stretching and looking for light, so to speak. They get pretty thin and not very strong. And then the ones in the greenhouse are kind of in between the two. They're a little bit darker green than the sunny window, definitely not as tall. They're not as thick as the LED lights. I will mention that the LED light had the benefit of being on 24 hours a day. I've had people make comments about the LED lights being on 24 hours a day on my sprouts, because there are different cycles that the plant goes through where they do need light and they do need dark, and some plants won't even fruit or bloom correctly without having periods of dark. But when it comes to microgreens and sprouts and things like that, when it doesn't matter, and it's actually beneficial to have 24 hours a day lighting. And it's a topic for some debate, but I think this is a pretty good evidence, although anecdotal evidence, that having a light on 24 hours a day is pretty beneficial. So they are clearly, in my opinion, the right choice. The best choice for making microgreens would be to have the light on 24/7. It is in the middle of winter, so the greenhouse doesn't have nearly as much light as it could as far as number of hours. So I want to maybe repeat this experiment later on when we're getting closer to spring. I love the flavor of these, and I'd love to see which one you guys think look best. So go ahead and comment below on whatever you think. It's not a perfectly scientific experiment, but it's fun to do nonetheless. I'd say the most popular and common way is doing them in a sunny window. This window doesn't get direct sunlight ever, but it is a pretty bright sunny window for most of the day. And as far as harvesting, if I am careful with these peas and I don't snip them too low, there's tiny little branches you can see, little offshoots on these peas. If I cut above that, I can actually get a second harvest of microgreens. That's what I prefer to do. It's not nearly as thick or as full as the first harvest, but it's still more. And it's fun to have a second harvest without having to redo the whole thing. How I like to harvest them is simply grabbing them here, giving them a snip, and that's totally edible, just like that. If I want to store them a little, I like to put them in a baggie, a zip top bag, and then put them in the refrigerator. And they'll last for a few days. It's super nutritious, it's a fun thing to do, and it's easy. Clearly, if I only did one tray, that would not take up hardly any space, so anybody should be able to fit their microgreens somewhere in their house. So just a quick video, I don't have my microphones on me or anything, but I was getting ready to compost this harvested set of microgreen peas. I thought this was interesting. I pulled it out in one solid mat. You can see how much the root mass has developed. It's pretty funny.